Hello, everyone. I'm on a new platform, so apologies for some of the bugs that we're going to experience while I figure this platform out. Um, but for the recorded version, I'd like to start the show with this.
To the fans, oh boy. I grew up a fan of the Warriors. My first I was like the 10-year-old kid up in the upper Oracle. I was telling the business side who I just met with that I get Warriors tickets for my birthday. And it was months in advance. This is when you actually got the hard tickets. There's no digital tickets. So my brother, my dad, and I would go. And I was born in 75, and that was the last championship. And to feel like I had helped give this fan base and this community, did my part, not perfectly, but as best I could, to get some more of those things. And Joe said it when he got hired, or not hired. Joe didn't get hired when he bought the team. They were going to have more of those. And I remember looking at that thinking, how the Warriors aren't very, how are you going to do that? And boy, did he do it. And it's crazy to see those 4 new ones up there and where the organization has come. But I'm so thankful. I wish, part of me wishes I could have been a fan during it all. I might have enjoyed it more, and I hate saying that, but I might have sitting up there in the upper deck or wherever I was sitting. But wow, the people that I see on the streets, the people I see in the airports, very kind fan base.
You're going to be missed, Bob Myers. This is Locked On Warriors.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Warriors your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com. Use the promo code Locked On. You can follow me, Cyrus Saatsaz, on Twitter at Dog Surf Roadshow. Sorry for the late start. I've been my partner in crime on this program, Kylen Mills, got caught up, I guess, in work last minute. I've been waiting. I still honestly don't know what's going on. I hope she's doing okay. Most likely she got caught up by one of the 10 other jobs she has. We both are in part of what we like to call the gig economy, where, we often, like a lot of people out there, we have multiple positions to pay the bills and sustain our livelihoods. And Kylen has a lot of other gigs, so she is probably busy there. But regardless, I apologize for the late start. And today's a bummer. I don't know how to spin this. And I'm looking at the chat now. Gilbert. I look. She again. Anyways, today's rough. Bob Myers was originally hired as the assistant general manager to Larry Riley. Larry Riley, his predecessor, drafted Stephen Curry. Players have a very strong affinity to general managers who draft them, as evident by the fact that Steph named his oldest daughter Riley after the GM that selected him. Larry Riley also selected Klay Thompson, but Bob Myers was the assistant GM at that point. And then in his first full year as GM, Bob had a masterful draft where he selected Harrison Barnes, Festus Ezeli, and Draymond Green with the 35th pick in the second round, and it all went from there. A lot of his detractors will tell you that Myers is overrated because of Jerry West's influence. Jerry West is a brilliant individual, especially when it comes to basketball. He has an absolutely high acumen when it comes to basketball IQ. But that really takes a lot away from the fact that Myers was the final decision maker. Myers was still the GM. And look, Jerry West has been with the Clippers for what, 4 or 5 years now, and I don't really see them achieving success. So meanwhile, under Myers' leadership, the Golden State Warriors won 4 titles and had a dynasty. Now, see people like Ray Lang, who's in the chat saying, "How about better drafting?" I don't think Myers has a real eye for talent. Again, I did a whole show about a week or two ago about Myers, and the criticism toward his drafting to me is asinine for the simple reason that under his leadership, the Warriors turn into a dynasty. And when you're a team that's successful year after year after year, you don't get lottery picks. You don't get high draft picks. Nearly all of his picks were oftentimes number 28, number 30. Some years he didn't even have a first round pick. So you're criticizing him for these super late first round picks, if not second round picks, which on a side note, I consider him to have a very high success rate given how late in the draft he had to select these players with. Kevon Looney is an important note. He was selected at number 30. Jordan Poole selected at number 28. Eric Pascal, who I thought was really good and serviceable briefly before they just traded him for nothing, was a second round pick. You could look at Jacob Evans and look at that as a negative. Yeah, maybe. Damian Jones. Yeah, maybe. But again, I can't. If you can find me a GM that has hit gold every time with late first round picks, second round picks, show me, because I've never seen it. And correct, D, as Bob has said, it is hard to draft. It is one of the hardest parts. So regardless, and again, for anyone who's been a longtime fan of the Golden State Warriors, you understand how much turmoil and how many downtrodden years this organization went through before Bob Myers got here. I mean, we have to give credit, obviously, to Joe Lacob and Peter Gruber, who thankfully bought this organization from Chris Cohan. But the first few years were not easy. This was not a successful team. This was not a playoff team until Bob Myers really started to get his fingerprints on this roster. And the track record is just astounding. That clip, by the way, really hits hard for me because I always knew Bob Myers was from the city of Danville over in the East Bay, a suburban enclave that's really sheltered, very affluent. But, I've heard also people say he grew up in a middle-class household, which I've always found difficult to comprehend, given he grew up in Danville. I know there are exceptions, and maybe he was one of the exceptions. But that clip really hit hard to me, and it hit home simply because I didn't grow up with money. I'm born and raised here in the Bay Area, but when I grew up here, there was such a thing as a middle class. And maybe Bob did grow up in a middle class household. My family was lower middle class at best. I grew up a Warriors fan. I played CYO basketball, but my parents thankfully got me into playing organized competitive basketball. It was, the Catholic Youth Organization. I started that when I was, I think, 7 or 8 years old. And I played basketball every year since, organizationally, all the way through my 30s. And the Warriors were one of my safe havens, one of my escapes from a childhood that, if your childhood was not that easy, maybe you can relate, and when you grow up in a household that features yelling and turmoil and alcoholism and divorce and abuse, and I mean, it's you understand where I'm coming from. You need escapes, and the Golden State Warriors, at least for me, was an escape. And I remember, just like Bob Myers, asking for Warriors tickets for my birthday, and the one year my parents finally came through with tickets. This was back when they were together, and I was still very young. Of course, naturally, I get sick, so I couldn't even go the first time they got tickets. And then some years later, I finally went to my first Warriors game. I think this was like in '91. They played the Timberwolves. This is one of the earliest years of the Minnesota Timberwolves franchise. I mean, they were an expansion team, for those of you old enough to remember. And just like Bob, I was sitting way up in the rafters at Oracle. And I've always loved this team. And so to hear that speech, which is what I just played, again, just really hit hard. Because I could understand where he's coming from. He probably did not get a chance to enjoy the success as much as he wanted to. And he's going to be sorely missed. So we bid you adieu, Captain. You did a phenomenal job, Bob. It's going to suck that you're leaving. And I'm very curious to see what comes next. So we're going to talk about that. The what comes next part, because that's huge. That's vitally important. And we need to discuss that. And Joe Lacob took the podium with Bob after Bob initially addressed the media. And we're going to talk about that and so much more because the question of what's next was introduced in that speech. And so we're going to cover that and much more here on Locked On Warriors. First, I got to give some love to our sponsor for today, which is Prize Picks, and talk about a fantastic resource to basically deflect from reality, speaking of that topic, and having some damn fun when it comes to daily fantasy sports. The NBA Finals are right around the corner. They start, I believe, on June 1st, which is this Thursday. And one of the best ways to entertain yourself, especially if the Nuggets blow the Heat out as is expected. I really hope the Heat make this a series, but I'm not hopeful for that. But regardless, one of the best ways is daily fantasy sports, and more specifically Prize Picks, where you can bet over-unders on the players who are involved, whether it's Nikola Jokic, whether it's Jimmy Butler. The whole premise of Prize Picks is over-unders. Is Jokic going to score more or less than 25 points? Is Jimmy Butler going to grab more or less than 7 rebounds? You got to pick a minimum of 2 and a maximum of 6. You can win up to 25 times your money. It's fun. It's legal in California. The withdrawals are safe and easy. You don't have to deal with sketchy wire services. So download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. And if you deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you that as well. Whatever you put in, they will match. So when you start playing, you're playing with double what you put in. Don't forget to enter the promo code Locked On to sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Warriors your first listen every day. For the everydayers, I'm hoping Kylen joins the show tomorrow. She actually texted me, which is a relief. That I now know she's okay. So we'll figure out when she's going to come on next. Again, she's a busy individual. I totally understand. But regardless, we're going to obviously break down the future of the Golden State Warriors. And I want to see what people are saying in the chat right now. Bruce Morrow, let's go Heat. Totally. I'm with you. Oh my God, look. Hi, Mom. Look, my mom is in the chat right now. I did go to some Warriors games, Mom, but I wasn't as young as you think. I was in my late teenage years. But yes, you did take me to a lot of games, Mom. And I do sincerely thank you for that. Your mom creeping into my chat. Anyway, so what are the Warriors going to do? Well, why don't we hear from Joe Lacob, the owner, one of the principal owners of the Golden State Warriors. The Warriors actually have a lot of owners in general. But they have 2 principal owners, and that's Joe Lacob and Peter Guber. And Lacob was on the podium with Bob Myers today. And why don't we hear from him? So let me share the screen again. I'm using a brand new platform today. So I apologize if there's a little amount of hiccups here and there, but here is Joe Lacob addressing the future of the Golden State Warriors without Bob Myers.
You think that you're going to make a decision on who is going to replace him?
I'm not gonna box myself in here, to be honest and open about this. We really just learned about this when you learned about it this morning. I was always hopeful that Bob would continue on, that somehow he was joking, but he wasn't. So, obviously I've thought about it. We've got some ideas. We'll make a decision as soon as we can, but I want to make sure that we make the right decision. And, if it happens in a week, great. If it happens in a month, great. We'll make that decision through a natural course, have the right process. I think we're preparing for the draft and free agency and all those things regardless, and we'll be ready.
Hey, Joe, not to box you in any further, but do you think Bob's replacement will almost certainly be internal, or will there be any outside candidates on the table?
I'm not going to comment on it at this time. I will say that we do have a very strong organization, and I think that there's a good possibility it could be an internal candidate, but haven't made a decision, so I can't really give you an answer. We're going to work on that.
Joe, a couple quick questions. Is Bob running the draft then?
Tim, I wasn't very good at that anyway, so
I don't think we've even gotten to that level of what's going to happen exactly in the next month. I guess he's employed theoretically till June 30th. So the draft falls within there, but we don't know. Support role. Okay.
And also, he's sitting right in front of me when I ask you, is your son, Kirk, a candidate to become the general manager?
I'm not going to comment on who's a candidate, who's not a candidate at this point. I'm going to keep you all guessing.
Look, in all reality, chances are that Mike Dunleavy Jr. will be the next GM. Chances are Kirk Lacob, who I believe is Joe's oldest son, will take on a role with the Golden State Warriors in the front office. He's already had a role. And we could talk about the why of things, right? Like, why is Bob Myers stepping down? Well, there's a myriad of reasons. One is, I don't know if you've ever seen his wife. She's beautiful. She's a former, what do they call them, Laker girls? And she was a cheerleader for the Los Angeles Lakers. My understanding is they have 3 beautiful daughters. And Bob Myers has made enough money to last him a lifetime. So put yourself in Bob Myers' shoes. You're financially set. You've won 4 world titles as the GM and president of the team you grew up loving. And you're in this situation I'm about to get into, which is not as pretty as it used to be. Times have gotten complicated for the Golden State Warriors. And the peace and harmony that used to exist no longer does exist now. And that has to be addressed. But Bob Myers, first and foremost, is leaving because he has a beautiful wife, he has a beautiful family, and he wants to spend time with them, plain and simple. Now, will he feel this way a year from now? Who knows, right? I mean, maybe a year from now, he's going to feel fulfilled in terms of family, and he wants to get back in the mix. And in all honesty, wouldn't surprise me if he came back to the Warriors. It really wouldn't. Now, that's part of it. You can also point to the fact that early in this season, when Bob Myers entered the final year of his contract as a lame duck GM, the first offer, Joe Lacob, who calls Bob Myers his 5th child, the first offer he gave him was a lowball offer. And look, this is how Lacob rolls. His first offer, and it's a little surprising it's this transparent, or maybe it's not this transparent, but I picked up on it. Joe Lacob's negotiating tactic is to always come in first with a lowball offer. He did this to Stephen Curry with his most recent extension, where he did not offer a 5th year. And Steph kind of was taken aback at that. And they had to come back and present Stephen Curry with another offer that included the 5th year, that was maxed out. And then Steph said yes. The first offer presented to Bob Myers was a lowball offer. It was nowhere near what the final offer was. I am certain of this, and it sucks, but it's true. I've heard enough to know this to be true, that if that first offer had blown Bob Myers away, we probably would not be in this situation. The fact that it was a very low offer, Lacob had to come back with a second offer that still did not make Bob Myers, to my understanding, the highest paid GM in basketball. That is what Myers and his representation wanted. And then Myers had time to think. Myers had time to go through a season where, for the first time under his tenure, he had a head coach that was not in line with him. The vision was not the same. Bob Myers was crafting a team that was going to be set up for the future. And he crafted a team that had a number 2 pick on its roster, that had a number 7 pick on its roster for one of the deepest drafts in NBA history, referring to Jonathan Kuminga, had a number 14 pick from that same draft in Moses Moody. But then he had a head coach who he does respect and love, I don't doubt that, but who did not agree with him and opted instead to play 2-way players and not play the players that Myers drafted. This is a conflict that exists in a lot of sports organizations, where you have front office individuals and coaches who don't always see eye to eye. This is common, but it was not common for the Warriors. Until this year, those two were always on the same page. And if you've been listening to this show, if you've been watching this show, you've heard me saying it since last August and September, that those two started to split in terms of the vision for this team. And that wore on Bob Myers. all of a sudden Myers was in a position where he had an owner who loved him. He had a coach who he was on the same page with. And now he had an owner who was lowballing him. Shouldn't have been a surprise. That's how Laker rolls. But he also had a coach who was going his own direction, going his own path, and probably gave enough right there for Myers to sit back and reflect a little bit and to think, you know what? I've got a beautiful family. I've been doing this for long enough. Why am I dealing with this headaches at this stage of my life? So that's what led eventually to Bob Myers departing. It was probably a confluence of things, but it didn't help that you had Steve Kerr defying what Myers wanted. The James Wiseman debacle, for instance. Bob Myers did not want James Wiseman to be traded away and become a part of this team's past. Bob Myers drafted James Wiseman with the intent of Wiseman getting minutes, with the intent of Wiseman playing. And when he saw Kerr lose faith in him, when he saw Kerr lose trust in him, and which led to the forced trade for Gary Payton II, which was also a cost-cutting move, that wore on Bob. When Bob watched this season and he saw two-way players getting runs over 2 lottery picks he drafted who could have contributed this season, as evident by the way Moses Moody played in the postseason, that wore on Bob Myers. And Myers thought, what's the point? I've done it. I'm going to leave the stage as one of the greatest executives in the history of this game. I've got a beautiful family. I'm set for life financially. What's the point of all this? So here we are now. Now, what does the future hold? Look, Lil Panda, you're right. Bob did say it's not about money at this point because the final offer would have made Bob Myers the highest paid GM. But back last August, September, at that point, money played a huge part of this. And look, the money is not necessarily the money itself. When you're making an offer to an employee, or when you're an employee and you've worked your ass off and you're ready to get a pay raise, and your boss comes at you and lowballs you and because money in itself, its intrinsic value is that word value. Like how much an employer offers you shows how much they value you. So when an employer comes in with a lowball offer, that's going to rub you the wrong way. You're going to sit back and reflect on that a little bit. So at this point in the game, it's not about money, correct? Because he had a lot of time to think. But in the beginning, it was. That did play a part. Look, this part sucks. Now, Word Man, I want to read your comment real quick. In Kerr's defense, Kuminga, Moses Moody. I'm not referring to Patrick Baldwin Jr. He is a raw rookie who no one was really arguing for him to play extensive minutes this year. And you are correct. Jonathan Kuminga had 1 year of experience in the G League. Granted, it was under Brian Shaw, former NBA player, great coach. Moses Moody, granted 1 year of college experience in Arkansas, but under a coach in Eric Musselman, who understands the pro system as a former NBA coach himself. Moses Moody grew up in an AAU background. The dude can play. Even though they didn't have years of college experience, they're ready to play this year. And they weren't. It's just, and if you don't agree with me on that, agree to disagree. That's okay. But they should have played. Anyway, so the future. And this is the part that, Anthony Slater and Marcus Thompson wrote this great piece. I can't remember when it was. I think it was like January, February, about how Joe Lacob started taking on a more hands-on approach to drafting, to free agency, to personnel. And Kirk Lacob, I'll say this in defense of him. He does know basketball. Kirk Lacob almost played for Stanford. He was a walk-on tryout. You don't get to that point if you can't at least play. All right. So Kirk Lacob was a walk-on tryout for the Stanford Cardinal. Okay. So at least he knows basketball. He's not just some trust fund kid who has never picked up, a leather ball, has never dribbled or shot. He at least understands the game. I don't like the optics of the owner's son taking over. You're suddenly veering very close to Jerry Jones territory there, because that's how Jerry Jones runs the Dallas Cowboys. And there are parallels. I mean, Jerry Jones, when his Dallas Cowboys won those 3 Super Bowls, at least the first 2, that was largely because of Jimmy Johnson, right? You had a phenomenal coach, and then Jerry Jones' ego exploded with that 3rd Super Bowl because he had Barry Switzer as his head coach, and that made him think at that point, I know enough. And the parallels are fascinating because Jerry Jones does have a football background himself, which makes him think that, he can handle personnel, but the optics of it. And there's also a reason why the Cowboys haven't won a Super Bowl in damn near 30 years. And the optics of it just don't look good because it still represents nepotism, right? I don't, it's just not a positive symbolic gesture to let the world know that your kids are inheriting these really powerful positions. It just isn't good optics. With that said, there could be some hope, given that Kirk Lacob actually knows basketball, that they can continue this run. And thankfully, Joe Lacob is a very competitive owner. Dude loves to win. So you can at least sit back and feel comfortable that Joe Lacob is not going to be happy with a losing team. This is not Chris Cohan, who had alcoholism issues, who had financial issues. I sat in the owner's box with Cohan many years ago once, and the dude, he's an interesting character. I'll leave it at that. I am grateful that Joe Lacob is the owner of this team. But right now, Mike Dunleavy Jr. and probably Kirk Lacob are going to be running things. Brent Barry was brought in some years ago to interview for the assistant GM job that ultimately went to Mike Dunleavy Jr. He is my choice. I've said that before. I would love for Brent Barry to come in here and take over either as a GM or a head coach. He's being groomed right now by the San Antonio Spurs to take over RC Buford's job. The Warriors could slip in there and grab him before that happens. But look, who am I? I'm just a podcast host, and Joe Lacob's going to make these decisions. So here we are. Now, in regards to my thoughts on that, as SG Sports Talk Channel asks me, what are my thoughts on Mike Dunleavy Jr. replacing Bob Myers? I'm not ecstatic about it, but a lot of that is based on my remembrance of Mike Dunleavy Jr. as a player when he was just straight out awful as a third pick by the Warriors. That also kind of, rings with the nepotism theme here because Mike Dunleavy Jr., his dad is Mike Dunleavy, former NBA head coach and player himself. And you could argue he's in these positions because of his dad. But we also don't really know if he's a good personnel guy. We don't really know what his management style is like, what his talent evaluation is. So the good news is he might know basketball. He might. It's just going to have to be a wait and see approach. We're going to have to put some trust in Joe Lacob, plain and simple. Joe, you write, and Joe, I know who you are. I agree with almost everything you always say. Joe writes, Lacob will do whatever it takes to win. Maybe steal from Pat Riley's personnel people. Maybe. Whatever it is, that is the comfort that I think Dub Nation can take from all this, is that we have an owner who came in, and I'm sorry for using the word we. I say that as a fan. The Warriors are in great hands when it comes to ownership. Joe Lacob is one of, if not the best owners in the NBA. Does it suck that Bob Myers is stepping down? Yes. Does it suck that the Warriors are in a position right now where we have no idea what the future holds? Yes. Draymond Green is a perfect example of that. Draymond Green told Mark Spears after losing Game 6 to the Lakers that if Bob Myers goes, I go. That his future is hindered on the future decisions of Bob Myers. Who knows if that's true? There were a lot of emotions running after Game 6. Dre clearly loves Bob Myers. Dre and Steve Kerr's relationship is much more complicated than that. I wouldn't say the love is there in the same level. The respect is there. But in the same way that Kevin Durant did not care about staying here, and Steve Kerr was a huge reason for that, so too could be the reason for Draymond Green leaving, is because he wants to try something new, because the guy who drafted him number 35, the guy who was oftentimes almost like a father figure to him in Bob Myers, someone who was a mentor, someone who a confidant, is now gone. And I'm very curious to see what Draymond decides, because he has not opted into that player option yet. He could become an unrestricted free agent. It would help the Warriors salary cap situation. But if he bounces, the dynasty's over. I mean, the dynasty is borderline over right now. I mean, we have to really start facing the fact that unless the Warriors make some very significant personnel decisions, they're in a transition period. You still have Stephen Curry. You still have some other talent on this roster, but you're not the best team in the NBA anymore. And unless you make some serious changes, you're going to be a team that competes for a playoff spot, but is not competing for world championship. So we got to see what happens. Trae Young, you're talking about Iguodala becoming the next GM. I don't know who said that. Joe writes, still need a GM with gravitas. Absolutely. To harness Draymond and not let Draymond be the GM. Totally agree with you on that. Don't agree with Prathik Rao, who writes, Dre was probably okay with Bob retiring. No. That's not true at all. They have a very, very close relationship. MVP JB, this is an interesting one, writes, if Curry, Clay, and Dre have the right guys around them, they'd be playing the Heat right now for a repeat world championship. Maybe. I mean, the Nuggets were such a powerhouse, though. I don't know how the Warriors would have beaten them, regardless of who you're playing. I think they could have beat the Lakers with better coaching. The Nuggets are just they're steamrolling everyone. And thank you for being a fan, SG Sports Talk. That is very kind of you. So that's where we are. Today was a goodbye to Bob Myers, a man who, under his leadership, turned the Golden State Warriors from an also-ran, turned them from literally a laughing stock in the NBA, which is what the Warriors were. For nearly 40 years, the Warriors were the laughing stock of the NBA. Bob Myers, Joe Lacob, they turned this ship around. And Steve Kerr, as the head coach, won them championships. No disputing that. But the future right now is interesting, and we'll see what happens. Steve Wilton writes, I think Dre opts out, and then the Dubs offer him 3 years at $60 million. Maybe. That's a possibility. It is a possibility. We got to see what happens. So that's where we are. I'm just happy Kylen is okay. Hopefully she'll join me tomorrow. Follow the program on Twitter at LockedOnDubs. Hey, C. Murray, I did hear that too. I don't buy that. C. Murray in the chat real quick writes, Joe Lacob and the organization did not find out he was leaving. Oh, yeah. Okay, I do agree with you. Did not find out he was leaving today. Joe Lacob is cocky and smart. We are good. Yes, and that's in reference to Lacob saying in the press conference today that they only found out this morning or until today that Bob Myers was leaving. And that's so not true. I knew last night he was leaving. There's no way I'm knowing this stuff before Joe Lacob. So you're absolutely right. And MVP JB, I'm with you. I'm very curious to see how this off season goes, because the Warriors have a lot of big decisions. We heard that Bob Myers might still support the team in the draft process. I highly doubt he's going to be involved in terms of what they do with the 19th pick. But nonetheless, this is where we are, man. Bob Myers, you did a phenomenal job, man. You're going to be missed. And for everyone who joined the show today, thank you. Thank you so much. SB Sports Talk channel, email me, warriors24pod@gmail.com if you're really legitimate in what you wrote. And Joe, I agree with you, man. I think Jonathan Kuminga is the future of this team. It's just time to play him. It's time to give him that full-time role. Whether I'm not saying full-time role meaning starter, but give him 25 minutes a night plus minimum. And Yosari and Joe, thank you so much. And we'll be back at this soon. Take care, everyone. Thank you.